What's up guys, Excalibur here and welcome back to Star Ocean Anamnesis. So the bride characters are coming out tomorrow, which means that I'm going to have to finish up Mavelle today, so without further ado, let's go. Mavelle is an ace invoker that can increase your party's AP recovery speed. Her first talent, Grim Destiny, increases her int stat by 40%. That 40% is already integrated in the 3800 int stat that you can see there, and that's insanely high. It's not quite Sophia levels of high, but it certainly allows her to do damage. And then her second talent, Unbreakable, increases the AP cost of all of her attacks by 100% when she uses Hail Orb, but it also increases the damage that ice skills do by 300%. Now this is an interesting talent. Hail Orb is one of her battle skills, so whenever she uses that, her AP cost gets doubled, but her ice damage goes way up, and that's very good for her Crystalized Arctic Impact attack. And then her third talent, Light of Redemption, increases her own AP recovery speed by 100% when she uses Aerial Lancer. And this is another one of her buff attacks. Aerial Lancer is also a battle skill, so whenever she uses that, she increases her standing AP recovery, allowing her to have less downtime. And then her last talent, Arcane Arts, gives her anti-flinch casting and increases the AP recovery speed of the entire party by 30%. Anti-flinch casting, as always, is very nice. It allows her to not have to worry about positioning as much, and the extra AP recovery speed does help the party, but it's not that great. And Hail Orb is her first battle skill. Fire a blast of cold air at your foe. Its power is determined by multiplying int by 230%, does 2 hits, costs 30 AP, and it has an ice element. And this is the attack that buffs her ice damage, so if you're running Crystalized Arctic Impact, this is a very good skill to combo with that. If you're not running Arctic Impact, then it's just going to screw over your light attacks. And then her second skill is Aerial Lancer, unleash myriad lances of light. Its power is determined by multiplying int by 200%, it does 8 hits, costs 20 AP, and it has a light element. So Mavelle is an ice and light hybrid invoker, and this is one of her light attacks. It's fast, does a lot of damage, doesn't cost much AP, and it also buffs her AP recovery speed, so overall it's very good. And then we have Aurora Rings, manifest many pillars of light beneath your foe. Its power is determined by multiplying int by 460%, it does 5 hits, costs 35 AP, and it has a light element. So this is her strong light skill, and it can definitely do damage, especially against large bosses, because it has a very wide AoE, so if you're fighting a big boss, all of the pillars can hit them, and it can make their health bar disappear in an instant. And then we have Crystalized Arctic Impact, manifest a pillar of ice, occasionally freezes foes. Its power is determined by multiplying int by 740%, it does 2 hits, costs 45 AP, and it has an ice element. Isn't Crystalized spelled with 2 L's? Regardless, this is her strong ice skill, and as you can see, it costs 45 AP, so you can imagine once you use Hail Orb, that goes up to 90, which means that you can only use it once in your combo. So generally you would do a normal attack into this and then dash cancel it. And if you're fighting a boss weak to ice, you can completely destroy them with it. And then her rush, 7th star. Draw upon the powers of the 7 stars and launch 7 beams of light at your foe. Its power is determined by multiplying int by 4000%. It has an ice element, and as a post-rush buff, it increases her int damage dealt by 50% for 20 seconds. So we have a 4000% multiplier paired with her 3800 int stat, and it's also got an ice element, so this rush should definitely go somewhere near the end of your rush combo chain if you want the most damage out of it. And her post-rush buff is a simple one, but it's very welcome. Int damage dealt plus 50% is huge, and it will make her damage output skyrocket. And now for weapons, kind of unfortunate that we don't really have a wide variety of orbs yet, but Mavelle can make do with all of the ones that we do have. So first of all, I recommend the Blue Star gadget, which you can get from the coin shop. It has a 560 int stat at max level, increases your int by 15%, reduces damage taken by 10%, and at max limit break you unlock a 10% HP recovery every 3 seconds. So seeing as how Mavelle's int stat is already really big, a 15% increase is going to be an even bigger increase than it usually is with other characters, and the HP recovery is nice. It's not really necessary, but overall this is a very good weapon for her. And then for gotcha weapons, we have the Raven Orb. First of all, this has a 961 attack stat. It increases ice damage by 40%, gives you 10% extra crit hit chance, 15% extra crit hit damage, and at limit break 5 you unlock a 10% stun chance. Now, it's kind of unfortunate that it increases ice damage dealt because Mavelle already does that for herself. I'm pretty sure that the 300% overwrites this 40%. So like I said, that's kind of unfortunate, but it does give you extra critical hit chances and crit damage, and as well as an extra stun chance if you can get that. So that is very decent for her. Seeing as how she doesn't really have much else, you kind of need to run this. And then for her second gacha weapon, which I think is actually a lot better, we have the Evil Pumpkin, which has a 963 attack stat, increases elemental damage by 20%, gives you a 10% crit hit chance and damage, and at Limit Break 3 you unlock a 5% HP recovery every 3 seconds. So seeing as how we don't have any light elemental orbs yet, you kind of need to make do with this thing. And like I said, with Raven Orb, the ice damage gets overwritten by her self buff, but with this one, it doesn't. And the extra crit hit chance and damage, also nice for increasing damage, and the HP recovery, again, not really necessary, but if you can get it, also nice. And for accessories, I recommend the Jinx Necklace, which increases her rush combo damage and gives her guts, which helps with survivability. You could technically run the Enchanted Bird's Charm as well, which reduces cast time and reduces the attack damage you take, but because she uses an orb, her cast times are already really fast, so the 10% cast time reduction is not going to do much. And seeing as how she is a hybrid invoker, her battle skill setup is also very dependent on the situation. But, first of all, I recommend running Aerial Lancer because of the buff that you can apply to yourself, and because it's also just a pretty strong attack. And then secondly, Crystalized Arctic Impact, because we just need to fill a slot, and Hill Orb is kind of useless if you don't run it together with Crystalized Arctic Impact. So for the third slot, you can run either Aurora Rings or Hail Orb. And Aurora Rings, obviously, you would run that if you're fighting a boss weak to light, and Hail Orb if you're planning on running Arctic Impact. So if you're running both of her light attacks, a combo could look something like this. A normal attack into Aurora Rings, into Aerial Lancer, into as many Aurora Rings as you can fit. So ideally you want the enemy to be Element Burst Stun when you use Aurora Rings, because it's kind of inaccurate, but yeah, you can do a lot of damage like this. But if you're planning on running her ice setup, your combo could look like this. A normal attack into Arctic Impact, which you then dash cancel and then rinse and repeat. So this is of course assuming that you've already used your Hill Orb buff, which means that you can only use Arctic Impact once, but this is kind of how you would do her ice setup. So usually when it comes to party building for invokers, you don't really have much choice because we don't really have that many invoker buffers. On top of that, they are element locked, which means you can't really pick whoever you want. However, this time for Mavelle, we actually have another character that she synergizes pretty well with. Fiore. She buffs int for the entire party by 20%, buffs int damage by 15% when the skill chain is at 3 or more, and her damage output is also pretty high. And of course, Fiore also has ice attacks. They're not her strongest attacks, those are her dark attacks, but she does have ice synergy with Mavelle. And then up next we want another character that can buff, of course, so we're picking Relia. So Relia can give everybody passive HP regen, 5% HP every 3 seconds. She also buffs with Brute Enlightenment, and post-rush she increases single target damage by 30%. And Relia is also a light caster, so she does have that synergy with Mavelle, but she's mostly here for her Brute Enlightenment, which can help out both Mavelle and Fiore. And then lastly, somebody to draw aggro away from our casters, we have Edge. He buffs HP for the entire party by 40%, and post-rush he increases elemental damage by 50%. So like I said, Edge is here because of his ability to draw aggro. He can make sure that our casters can cast without getting interrupted. The HP buff makes everybody a bit more bulky as well, but his main buff, the elemental damage buff, can make both Fiore and Mavelle do tons more damage. So Mavelle is a pretty interesting invoker. She's got a very cool mechanic going on with Hill Orb. It's what allows her to be a lot faster than most other invokers because most of her combos exist of only one attack, so as soon as she casts that, she can cancel it and then get ready for the next attack. On top of that buff, she has a ton of other buffs that she applies to herself, which means that she doesn't really need any parties to support her. You can throw her into pretty much any party that you want and she's going to put in work. However, that amount of self-buffs also means that she does not make for a very good team player. She has almost no party buffs, and while that doesn't really matter right now because her damage output more than makes up for that, later down the line we'll get stronger invokers that have the same damage output as Mavelle, but they have better party buffing, which means that she kind of gets outclassed. Regardless, Mavelle is a very strong invoker, and she will do really well in public play. And that's it for my Mavelle guide. And now, I'm super excited for tomorrow because that's when the wedding banners arrive. I can't wait, so hope you guys are just as excited as I am, and I guess I'll see you all next time. Peace!